Welcome to Let's Get Writing. I'm your host, Catherine Taylor. Let's Get Writing is all about the writing process from inspiration to publication. And here is where we share the stories behind stories. And today is no exception. My guest is intimately familiar with the deeper story because she has lived it. She was happily married to Gerald Cotton, living a dream life when he died suddenly on their honeymoon in India, taking with him the key to a Bitcoin fortune of 250 million Canadian dollars. And this money belonged to investors who purchased Bitcoin from his platform, Quadriga. Well, her life began to unravel in unimaginable ways, and she eventually wrote a book about it. Let's welcome to Let's Get Writing Jennifer Robertson and hear her story from her. The book is Bitcoin Widow, Love, Betrayal. I'm just going to pop it up here, Jennifer. Hi.
Hi.
Love, hi. Love, Betrayal, and the Missing Millions. That's quite a great title, Jennifer, isn't it? It really covers it. Was
Yeah.
that your choice, that title?
No, it was the publishers.
It was the publishers. They
Yes.
have a way with words. They
Yes.
they they know what's going to reach the people and what's going to market. But
Yeah. I suppose
anyway,
they're a bit
it's
of experts.
they are. And Jennifer, it's been over 3 years since your life changed dramatically. And for anyone who might not be familiar, I covered it a little bit, but what was it like for you? What happened from your point of view?
In 2016, I met Jerry. He was everything that I was looking for in a partner. He was running his own cryptocurrency platform, and he had been running for it for about a year before we had met, and then throughout our 4 year relationship, it had just skyrocketed. In Jerry's words, he would have said that Bitcoin went to the moon, and our lives changed dramatically, and all of a sudden we had lots and lots of money. I felt I was living a fairy tale, and we were on our honeymoon in India in December of 2018. And we were there actually to visit and open a home for children that we had sponsored. So it was this, we had been to India for a specific reason. And Jerry fell really ill and he died. And after his death, that's when the whole nightmare happened, and again, my life changed before my very eyes, and I lost my husband, I lost my home, I lost my job, I lost everything because Jerry had been using his clients' funds from his trading platform inappropriately, criminally, and so that ended up that whole dream fairy tale life that I thought was real turned out to not be real, and that I found I suffered a lot from the downfall of it.
And you were young. I mean, you were you're still a young woman, and to step into a fairy tale life like that, and just so. I mean, we all at times in our lives have dreamed of something like that, and then to be living it and to have it taken away from you, and all the hardship that went along with that, it must have been terribly difficult for you.
Yes. And it
Yeah.
wasn't just losing everything. It was that I've material wise, but I had also lost Jerry, who was my very best friend, and I ended up losing a lot of my sense of self, who I was. I feel like
Mhm.
I lost years of my life just trying to climb out of this hole that someone else had dug and I had fallen into and been left at. So I felt I had lost a lot more than just the material things.
Yeah, in fact, really, the harder thing to recover from would be you, your self esteem, who you were, and what you had to bear, really. So, in your book, you share your entire story for the first time, and that came out. I think it was early it was in 2021, was it not?
The
Um,
book
can
published, it was
Yeah, yeah.
January 2022.
Oh, 2022.
Yes.
I'm living the wrong year.
Well, after all these
Time
pandemic years, what year really is it?
Yeah, I know, and so it's very recent. So in your book, you share the entire story. Why did you decide to write that book?
From the beginning, I felt that everyone had the story incorrectly. I understand there were so many things that had spun off in the media that made it look like I was involved or I had something to do with the whole scheme. But the issue was that I was a 30-year-old widow, and I was trying to figure out a very complicated cryptocurrency company that was sinking, and I was trying to appease everybody, and I was also just trying to make sense, to accept the fact that Jerry had died, because he had died so quickly and so unexpectedly, and I was carrying this huge amount of guilt because he had not wanted to go to India, and I wanted to open the orphanage. I felt like I was doing, something good for the world. And I feel like my love, like his love for me, um, made him go to India in a sense. And I feel like, maybe he wouldn't have gotten sick. Maybe if we were in a different hospital, you always have those what ifs and maybes.
Mm.
So I don't think the general public really knew what I was going through. And every time I seemed like I said anything, it got twisted and it was just blown out of proportion in ways that I hadn't anticipated. And so I decided that I wasn't going to speak anymore because I wanted to have my own platform where no one could interrupt me, nobody could
Mhm.
edit me, and that this book would be someone could read it from cover to cover and be like, okay, that's her story. And then I would feel much more comfortable with people making their decision on the situation based on reading my story. And then instead of just, listening to a podcast that is, in a sense, it was biased. A lot of them were.
Mhm. And really, when you think about it, the book is your story because you've been behind it, and like you say, no one can interrupt you. I honestly don't know how you could have done it any other way, because you're right. People have their opinions, and hosts influence the way that shows are done. And I'm sure anytime you came forward to speak, a lot of those investors had a lot of things to say that would twist your words or not even allow you to express where you were. And I totally understand why you would have done that. And I think it was a wonderful step. And was it cathartic for you as well? I mean, sometimes writing things and placing stories on pages, it just helps you recover from what you've gone through. Was it that experience for you?
Well, I think it was more therapeutic after it was written, and then I got to sit down with my book in my hands and read it myself as if I was a reader. And it almost then I was able to kind of relive my story from almost a different perspective. But while I was writing the book with Stephen Kimber, there was many, 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 many tears. I feel so badly for Stephen because this was at the beginning of COVID when we started working on it, and we would have our Zoom meetings, and I would tell him my story, and then I would just cry, and poor Stevie would just sit there and let me cry, and while I told my story, and then then he'd be like, all right, and then we'd move on and we talk about the next part of the story and how we wanted each chapter to lay out. So Stephen was an amazing co-author. That's what he listened to every single detail, and he was able to put into perspective what needed to go into the book. And yeah, no, it was a good experience that way.
Well, of course, you'd never written a book. And how did you meet Stephen? I know you published with HarperCollins Canada. How did that come together? How did they introduce you to him? How did all that unfold?
Stephen had actually contacted my lawyer maybe a year or so before I had contacted Stephen about the book. But he just had asked if he could speak to me, and my lawyer always forwarded any sort of journalist emails, and I just really liked his tone. I liked the way he presented himself. I liked the way he wrote, and I have a few friends that went to King's College for journalism, and they said he was an amazing professor and really well respected. So I had reached out to Stephen myself and asked if he would be interested in being a ghostwriter for my my story, because there was a lot of the legal proceedings and the Bitcoin jargon that I knew that I would have so much difficulty writing, and he is a brilliant writer. So I reached out to him, and his agent ended up connecting us with HarperCollins, and that's how that happened.
Where is Stephen based? Is he in New Brunswick?
He's in Halifax. So
Oh, in
he's in Halifax.
Halifax.
You know what's so funny? Because of COVID, Stephen and I still haven't met in person. Although he knows my entire life story. Yeah, the days of COVID for sure.
Yeah, interesting. And so that was one of the questions I had, was how you went about doing this. So you would do a Zoom call, tell your story, and then Stephen would take that and put that into words.
Yes, so we would have it transcribed. So he would get, my pages and pages sometimes of rambling, and I'm sure that where I was crying, there might have been some words that weren't very clear. But then he would often take large chunks of what I had said, put it into the book, and then, make it flow, like he had pieced it together. And anytime there was like legal proceedings, he wrote those parts. So that in a way that was very, an average reader could understand, that I could understand. And but a lot of it was really my voice. Like, I think there was a part where I said Jerry was cool as a cucumber. Like, those are the things I say. And so those were direct quotes mostly from me when we were talking about Jerry and the intimate pieces.
And Jennifer, I mean, when this whole thing unfolded, you were viciously attacked in the months after Gerald's death, and investors suspected that he disappeared with the money. They didn't trust you. You went through all of that. Then you and Stephen wrote the book. But were you fearful when the book came out, because you'd been through so much just in the first phase of this, and then to bring a book out? Were you fearful?
I think, well, I was very fearful in the beginning, which my book describes what happened to me. And, I get this question asked by a lot of my friends and family, like, are you scared it's just going to, reignite the fire, the hate fire? And I felt that, I was so disappointed in how I was painted, how my image was painted into the general public, and I didn't want to be remembered or known for that person. And so I felt I had already faced the most hate that I could ever have imagined, beyond my wildest dreams. And that if, at least when I put a book out, at least I would have a fair, like, I'd be able to defend myself from a fair standpoint, and that I would be able to have other people that could take my, read my side, and maybe I could convince them that, no, I'm not this horrible person that, either hurt Jerry or, was in on the scam or knew all of these kinds of things. And so that, knowing that I could change some perspective, made me realize that some of the hate that I'm going to get when the book comes out was going to be worth it. I also felt that I had gone through so much as a young woman, and I know that so many other people go through terrible things in life. Like, at some point, I didn't even know how I was ever going to live, because I was like, what was the point? I'll never be happy. I'll never get out of this. And I did. And I really wanted to share that with other people who might be going through something worse, something not as bad, or knowing that you can, get up after you've been pushed down or stampeded over.
It doesn't feel like it at the time when you're going through it, but I always remember a phrase that someone said to me, "This too shall pass." But definitely when you're in the middle of it, that just doesn't even, you don't even hear that, because it's almost impossible to believe that you will go through and come out the other end of something like that. And the thing as well, where you had lost Gerald, you were essentially on your own with this. He, as sad as it was what happened, and but he didn't have to live through anything that you lived through. I'm assuming eventually, had he been alive, this eventually would have crumbled at some point. But he escaped all of that, with his death, which is a sad thing, but you really had to carry all this on your shoulders. And I've read up on Bitcoin. I have thought about Bitcoin. It's a really complicated platform and trying to understand digital currency and so on. I mean, when you were faced with this, how did you feel? How were you didn't really understand his business.
I felt very overwhelmed. Um, I mean, finance isn't something that I was overly interested in, anyways. I'm more of a creative people person, and so just having to understand cryptocurrency, I wasn't interested in it. And then after Jerry died, all I could think about was that I was going to live the rest of my life without Jerry, and I didn't even want to think about Quadriga or the money because nothing had really mattered. And so I was forced to have to do it. And I tried to do it the very best I could in the circumstances that I was under. And another thing, too, is I don't think people understood that I was just 30 years old. And, the way that Jerry had died, like I had watched him die, and it was very traumatic. I was all by myself. I had no friends and family. And, I was carrying an immense amount of guilt. And to try to deal with all that plus all of the media scrutiny and the accusations, and then trying to deal with these large sums of money, it was just so much. It was
So much.
too much all at once on one person.
And when did you realize? Because really, when he died, you felt that there was going to be this email that would come through with password, sort of the everything would work out. When did you realize that everything wasn't going to work out and that maybe he wasn't the person that you thought he was?
Well, when I love someone, I'm so loyal, and I love them fiercely, like they're my person. And I defended Jerry until the very end, when the evidence showed that there was no more use in defending, and that he had done something wrong. And that was probably around the end of March, when my lawyer had called me and told me that basically they discovered that what he had done was fraud, and it wasn't just a case of no one can figure out what the passwords are for the cold wallets.
Hmm. That must have been heartbreaking as well. And come with, I mean, when you have people, when it comes to money, people are not forgiving. When they invest money and things don't go the way that they want to go, it's often a very, very volatile situation. And you know all about it, having lived through it. Well, did you think that writing the book, the chapters in your book, maybe would kind of close the book on this and you could move on with your life? Did you feel it would help in that way?
I do feel that way, and I have felt that way ever since, when it first was published. There was a lot of, talk about it, and I was, really nervous on, of how people would perceive it. Now that it's been a few months, and I feel like my life has finally started to, shift to the next chapter. I just had a daughter in March, and she's like the new, very love of my life now. And it feels like that quadriga is over, and this new chapter with my daughter and my career is starting. And it feels, for the first time, like I can really think, okay, quadriga is a thing of past.
Yeah, and there must be a relief that comes with that for sure. What was the hardest part about writing the book?
I would say the hardest part about writing the book was making sure that the book, like my goal of the book was to be very truthful. And some people said, oh, maybe you're a little too truthful, and when describing the money you spend and the things you did. But I felt that I had to give readers the whole story. Like, I wanted to give readers the whole story. I wanted to be a real person. I wanted to I wanted to be as honest as possible, so that readers could actually see that I was telling the truth, and I did the very best that I could. So I felt I couldn't tell all the details without saying, how I felt about. I think there was one situation, and I said I loved being rich, and I feel that a lot of people would love being rich, and I feel like that just I wanted readers to know that I was a real person.
Hmm.
And
And
I feel
that definitely, yeah, that definitely came across in the book because it's so easy when you have a target, when you're angry and someone that you can vent that anger against, you forget that they have feelings. They have a whole different perspective on it. And you were as much a victim really as were the investors in different ways. Yeah. Now, if somebody was in your situation or a similar situation and writing a tell all story, what advice would you have for them?
I think first would really you really have to make sure you want to do it and make sure of when you're telling your story who you're going to include in your story and if that's going to have some effect on them. Unfortunately, I did have a few friends and family members have issues with things that I said in the book. Nothing major, nothing that we couldn't get over, but just small things that you don't realize as an author that might be a little more hurtful or upset or more upsetting to somebody else. um, I also think another thing is sometimes it it still kind of hits me that a lot of people have read and know about my entire life now. And so you have to be
Yeah,
prepared that that's going to, someone can always pick up your book and always read about it. And so that's something you have to do. And I think that's the biggest thing is when you want to tell your story is knowing that once your story is out there, it is out there and anyone can read it and anyone can think what they want to think about you. I've read some amazing reviews which voice exactly what I wanted readers to understand. And then there are some that are, they did not like the book and you have to take that in stride. And so those are the biggest things I've learned from writing a book.
yeah. It makes you vulnerable. And you know what, Jennifer, that is not just shared by someone writing a book like yours. I think all authors with a first time book feel a certain amount of vulnerability, but yours was quite a different level, and really opening yourself up again to criticism had to be hard.
And it's a bit hard too because I had lots of people read the book, and then you kind of go through your life wondering, what their judgment was. I've had, and you just have to kind of live with that, be confident in yourself, and move forward.
Yeah, what you're doing, and you've graduated with your teaching degree.
Yes, yes, my
Yeah,
Bachelor of
yeah,
Education. Yes.
yeah. Yeah, congratulations on that. Now you also have the audiobook, and that's what I listened to. I got the audiobook and took it on my walks, and you voiced that book. How was that project for you?
I didn't voice that book.
Oh, you didn't? Oh,
No,
I
no,
thought
I
you
know. So
did.
that's good though, because I have spent so much time trying to pick out who voiced it. And I was because I kept pushing back on the publisher. I was like, but I want to do the audiobook. They're like, no, 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 you don't have enough speaking practice and like speaking appearances. And I was like, okay. So then I
Okay.
did end up spending lots of time listening to different auditions because I said I wanted the audiobook reader to sound like what I think I would sound like. So I'm glad that that worked out.
Well, and I was thinking it was you. I really was because and that was my question. It was like doing an audiobook takes a lot of skill, a lot of practice. How did you approach that? But I think you approach it by hiring the right person.
That yeah, and that's it was Stephanie Willing did a great job. And yeah, no, I was super pleased with it because when I hear her reading my book, I think I it sounds like me.
Yeah, it does. It very much does.
Yeah.
And now that this has all unfolded, when you think back, how are you feeling about Gerald? Do you feel angry, betrayed? Where is your heart now?
Um, I will always, always love the Jerry that I knew. So the Jerry that I knew, he really was the best husband ever. He was my best friend. When you meet someone and they genuinely just love being around you and like being and like who you are and just respect you. That was Jerry towards me. And um, So that is, but at the same time, that makes it bittersweet because there's many days that I am so angry with him and so disappointed. And I think the hardest thing for me is the shame, like me having to live with shame that he doesn't have to because he's passed away, but I have to, feel his shame for what he did to everybody else and to me, and just doesn't seem fair at all. Um, the Jerry that has hurt people, stolen money, the things that he did when he was younger. I don't even know who that person is, and I don't really ever want to know who that person is. So I feel like a lot of the times, in order for me just to survive and move on, is just trying to remember the Jerry that I knew, and then just try to like continue to live my life in that that mystery. Like I'll never really know because I'll never get to talk to him, so I will never get that. I just want to be like, why, Jerry? Like, why? What happened? But I'll never get that.
No. And that's something that probably will never leave the back of your mind. That unfinished conversation that you never ever are going to be able to have with him. And I can understand that would be definitely hard. Well, you have moved on, and I just want to thank you so much for sharing this part of your journey with us, and wish you so much joy with your new daughter and your new career, and just say that to see you rise from what you had to experience and to be where you are today, that it really is nice to see, Jennifer. I know it couldn't have been easy.
Thank you very much.
And thank you so much for being a guest on Let's Get Writing. And I'm just going to pop that book up again so people can see it. And folks, thank you so much for joining us on Let's Get Writing, Bitcoin Widow. You can get that from all the regular places. It was published by HarperCollins. And I hope you'll take an opportunity to read Jennifer's story or listen to her book, which is a beautiful experience as well, to hear the story as you work out. Have a great day, everyone, and I'll talk to you again soon.